Hello, welcome back to Soul Symbols. I'm Karen, and I'm here to give you the weekly astrology. So this week feels a bit like a strange kind of threshold moment. There's something here within the chart that's wanting to become clear, and it's going to be coming through memory, feeling the body, and perhaps an old narrative or story that's returning back to us for a second look. So we're at the week beginning the 22nd of June, 2026, and the big movement this week is from that fresh seed of the Gemini new moon. And it's moving into the deep waters of Cancer here. So what happens when that new thought form, narrative, or way of seeing life begins to stir our emotional bodies? Because that is what the week is really about. We've got the sun newly moved into Cancer straight after the solstice on the 21st. And we've also got Mercury there applying to Jupiter. And Jupiter's at that final degree of Cancer by the end of the week. And Mercury is also beginning to slow down ahead of its retrograde station. So there could be a new message forming or a conversation. There may be a memory or a realization, a piece of emotional knowledge rising to the surface for us. But the interesting thing is that Mercury doesn't quite reach Jupiter, that conjunction with Jupiter, before it slows and turns back on itself. So we've got an almost conjunction. It sort of almost arrives at that conjunction within 3 degrees. So that could be a thought that's not quite landed, or a conversation almost reaches its point. But the astrology is asking us to pause, listen again, and to understand that first version of the story might not be the whole story. That's what we got here. So in this video, I want to look at the movement from the Cancer sun and the Libra first quarter moon into Mercury applying to Cancer, while also keeping in view that larger background story of Uranus and Gemini squaring the nodes of fate, the nodes of the moon, and also Mars building toward Gemini and its conjunction in Gemini with Uranus. And it's because beneath the soft Cancerian language of home, memory, belonging and care and protection, there's also a lot of nervous electricity beginning to gather in the chart. So just let me get the charts up so we can take a look at the sky. Here we are. So here you see the sun just entered Cancer. So past that solstice point, the longest day, there is a Friday Muse on the podcast part about the solstice, if you want to go back and look at that. So it's always a turning point in the solar year. There's a change in the lights, the peak of the light, and the dark is rising. And we got that change in season here. So symbolically, it's a change in orientation. Gemini season, that's been airy, it's a mutable sign, so it brings a curiosity and mental activeness to it. So that's asking questions, gathering information, it's networking, making connections, and there's possibilities opening here. But sometimes Gemini can scatter us across quite a few threads all at once. A sense of being scattered. But once that sun enters Cancer, that light begins to move inwardly. Cancer's a water sign, it's lunar, it's a temple of the moon, protective, instinctive. So we've got it rooted in memory, Cancer, and belonging, home, family. It can be about our ancestry, our roots, shelter, nourishment, but ultimately it's about emotional safety here. So after that Gemini new moon, which carried that strong emphasis on thought, perception, narrative and communication, the sun in Cancer is asking us how that new story feels to us, how it's landing in our bodies and the memories that it's touching. So what emotional truth is that narrative awakening in us? And I think that's one of the most important threads of this week. We might have had an idea or a realization, or even a small or large shift in perspective around the Gemini new moon. But now that seed is moving into Cancerian waters. So it's asking to be felt, it needs to be digested, and it's going to be moving through our inner life. And if you look here, the moon is in Libra. So we're at that first quarter phase of the lunation cycle. So this is going to bring a point of tension, as all first quarter moons does, and also requiring action and maybe adjustment. The new moon planted something in Gemini, and this Libra moon squares the Cancer sun. So Cancer is asking us what's needed emotionally, and Libra sits with those energies within relationship, within the social field, and also within fairness, balance, dialogue, and mutuality. So this is a relational week, just as much as an emotional one. Might bring up the question of how we are going to hold our own needs while also remaining open to the needs of others. So it could show us where we've kept the peace by moving away from ourselves, or where our protective instincts have made it harder to stay in genuine dialogue. This first quarter moon often asks for some kind of response. There's an energetic that presses for movement here. It can't remain private and just within us. So that moon in Libra wants to make contact. It's asking us to consider the other. It's very relational. It's ruled by Venus, Libra. So we're talking of beauty and fairness and proportion, right proportion and civility. But with that sun in Cancer here, the emotional undertone is strong. So if we've got a polite surface, it might not be enough this week. There's a deeper question here for us about how we really feel, and if that feeling can be brought into relationship in a way that doesn't abandon either ourselves or the other person. And if you look here, the Libra moon is in connection, in a trine to Pluto in Aquarius here. So and that's the lovely aspect to trine. It's of the nature of Jupiter, but it brings a deeper social and psychological layer here. So we could be looking at relational patterns, group dynamics, friendships, communities, but definitely the collective narrative here, or that unspoken power structures underneath our agreements with others. And that can be agreements with institutions too. So Libra can sometimes smooth things over, but Pluto doesn't really allow the surface to remain untouched. It draws us into the underlying pattern. Pluto's lord of the underworld. And if you look here, we've got Mercury in Cancer. And as I said, this is a central signature, one of the central signatures of this week. Here it is at 24 degrees of Cancer, applying to Jupiter at 28 degrees. And that will move closer as the week continues. So it's a beautiful image in many ways, that. Mercury's that planet of language, interpretation, messages. It's communication, so writing, thought, speech, translation. And Jupiter is wisdom, meaning, faith, teaching, growth. It's coherence and the larger story. Very sage-like is Jupiter. When Mercury applies to Jupiter, there's often a desire to understand something more fully, to put words around an experience, to find the meaning and speak from that wider perspective that Jupiter brings. And this is happening in Cancer. Let me bring you back here. Here we are. So the wisdom is, it's not just a rational, logical or abstract kind of wisdom here. It's coming through memory in Cancer, and it may come through family stories, emotional inheritance, what we've inherited there. It can come literally through our bodies, the past, the home, the mother line. So we may be dealing with the mother wound, but it comes from the roots. We're looking at roots here. So It's probably going to feel very personal here for us. Mercury in Cancer doesn't always, it's not always direct in Cancer. It can speak through association, through our feelings and image, or recall. But it's also can come through the atmosphere and that emotional resonance that we can feel. And so this week, it might bring us into meaningful conversations, or the sense that something from the past is returning, because maybe because it's still got some wisdom to teach us. So we might come to a point where we're remembering an old event differently with a different perspective. We might suddenly understand something this week about why something affected us in the way that it did. And we might need to say something that's been sitting in our emotional bodies for a long time. That may appear this week. And yet, as I said, we've got Mercury slowing down for its retrograde, and that's crucial here. Mercury's moving toward Jupiter, but Mercury's also preparing to station retrograde. That'll be around 26 degrees of Cancer. So it is technically conjunct. It's within a 3-degree orb of Jupiter as it stations retrograde. So it's going to approach Jupiter and then it's going to pause before completing that conjunction. So there may be a sense of suspended feeling for this week, a sense of being suspended somewhere. The message is forming, but it's not going to fully arrive to Jupiter, if that makes sense for you. So there's a feeling of the meaning emerging, but that feeling is likely to need revision. And if a conversation opens here, we might need to return to it later. Nature of retrograde. So we got something really evocative about that. Mercury, there's a sense of Mercury wants to reach the arms of Jupiter. And that will mean our minds will really desire to have the meaning to something. We will want explanation, okay, and wise overview here. But that retrograde is saying go back and revisit that feeling, return to the memory, listen before you decide what the story means. So it really is a pause here. This is a week where it'll be really wise to pay attention to what comes up in us without rushing to finalize it. So that could be a dream, a conversation, a memory, even a line from a book, or something said by a family member is likely. And maybe that will stir an old feeling. It can be any or all of those things, but they're going to be part of Mercury approaching Jupiter in Cancer. That's the signature of it. But because Mercury's stationing, that first insight might only be the beginning of a longer process, okay? I'll put the dates of the retrograde in the description box if you want to look at them. Let me pop this chart up a minute. By the 20th, hang on. Here we go. By the 27th of June, you can see Mercury's moved to 26 degrees and Jupiter's at 29 degrees. And that Jupiter is in the final degree of the sign. So it's going to intensify the Cancerian themes. It's the anaretic. It's called the anaretic degree. So Jupiter's been traveling through Cancer for the last year, since June 2025. And that would have amplified themes of home and belonging, themes around protection, nourishment, care. But we're also talking here with the Moon's temple of memory, ancestry, emotional truth. So any of those themes may have been strong for you throughout this last year. But at 29 degrees, there's a sense of culmination. There's something being distilled, something reaching its final threshold in this sign. I'll just get you back. So Jupiter in Cancer is really generous. It's exalted here, very at home here. And, you know, Jupiter is the generous planet, but it's also in Cancer protective and nourishing. So we can think of the places where we feel held and those people and practices that restore us, and that emotional wisdom that grows through tenderness and care. But at the final degree, there can also be a sense of urgency for us. We can feel full with the year of Jupiter in Cancer, that sense that we're reaching the last, the last drop in the cup, so to speak. So Mercury approaching this Jupiter could be a feeling of our mind approaching a great reservoir of emotional meaning. So we might be asking what we've learned about belonging, what this last year has taught me about home, family, protection and care, and what nourishment really means for us. We could be looking at the story about the past that we're now ready to see from a different perspective. And because that Mercury is stopping before reaching Jupiter, that answer might not come neatly, okay? It often comes via a detour. So there may be delays here for that answer. And it may come through that retrograde period itself, as Mercury moves right back through Cancer. So it's asking us to re-enter that emotional landscape with more patience. So think about the things that have come up for you this year. It'll be good to look at that, to see what's culminating, getting reviewed, and eventually you'll need to work with what occurs. So the message for us this week is it's not quite finished. So that feeling that there's something here that is important trying to speak to us, but it's going to need time, revision, emotional honesty from us. So while all this Cancerian material is happening, we still have got Uranus in Gemini square the nodes of the moon, the nodes of fate. It's been the defining transit of this month. So it's still remaining there in the background of the chart. We still got that energetic. Uranus is at 3 degrees Gemini. It's squaring that nodal axis. That north node is in Pisces and the south node in Virgo. You can see it on the chart there. So this is a bigger collective rewiring. I do have a video of Uranus and Gemini. I'll pop it up here for you to look at if you want to. So Uranus and Gemini often will shake up language, communication, technology, media, education, transport and networks, information systems, and our mental field, our own mental field or the collective mental field itself. So watch for those things, watch in the media. We've got stuff going on with that Strait of Hormuz and the oil tankers not getting through. This could be the time that we get that effect of the lack of fuel, that will affect the transport there. So we have the South Node in Virgo. So we might find beautiful release around over analysis, perfectionism, or if we're constant fixers and sorters, or we diagnose. So that need to manage every detail is likely to be released here with that South Node. And the North Node in Pisces, we may feel a pull towards imagination, compassion. We may feel pulled to surrender, and that might be surrendering some old narrative. But we're going to be getting symbolic perception and more porous ways of knowing with the North Node in Pisces. And Uranus in Gemini is standing at a crossroads here. So it's like a messenger on steroids, okay? It's showing us that old mental map is going to be interrupted. So whatever your mental map is, be prepared to have it interrupted, okay? You just break in Uranus, that archetype. So it might be the way that we name reality, that's changing for us, or how we're processing information, or the language and how we speak to one another, that there's change there. So we got the Uranus in Gemini, but it's answering to Mercury, the ruler of Gemini. And as I said, that is in Cancer. So that disruption in the mind is getting rooted through the emotional body. So it's where the week here gets really, really interesting, because we might think we're dealing with information, but then underneath it, there's a lot of feeling. So if we're having conversations about facts, logistics, plans, or opinions, there may be deeper layers of memory, belonging, safety, protection. So really tap into your bodies this week, because it's so important this week. We're going to get a lot of information through the emotional and somatic field. Okay, really matters this week. But Uranus in Gemini has probably been really overstimulating our minds, and not just this week, it's been there for some time. Mercury in Cancer can pull us into that emotional recall, but we've also got Mars at the end of Taurus, and that can store tension physically. So there might be a need to slow down, ground, go for walks, cook, rest. It's Taurus, okay? He's at the end of Taurus, again, a culmination. We need to return to our bodies, to the soil, to our senses, and let our bodies tell the truth. Otherwise, our minds are going to like rush in with an explanation. It's going to finish the story all in logistics and nice little neat packages. So that Mars in late Taurus this week is going to move through 25 degrees to 28 degrees. So it's right near the anaretic degree during this week. Mars in Taurus can be slow, steady, stubborn, but it's embodied and persistent. So it's not necessarily moving quickly, but there's a sense of pressure building. So by the end of Taurus, Mars will be preparing to leave that fixed Earth and enter mutable air of Gemini. So it means the energy is preparing to shift from bodily pressure into mental speed. And I'll put the date for that move of Mars in the description box as well. So by the end of the week, Mars is close to entering Gemini, and it will begin moving towards Uranus. I will talk about that in next week's astrology. So although that main feeling of the week is Cancerian with all those themes and Mercury and Jupiter in Cancer, the sun, there's that crackle building underneath as an electric charge. It's becoming more restless. Our nervous systems might be on higher alert this week. And look out for words, because they can become sharper, and reactions. We can have knee-jerk reactions, okay? They can be faster, and we can become very impulsive with our decision making. Our technology, yeah, we're talking Mercury retrograde coming up. It can be more unpredictable. And also the travel. We can have disruptions and difficulties with the travel there. But we haven't got that full Mars-Uranus moment yet, but we're going to feel that gathering. It's a bit of a pressure cooker in the earth before the lightning strikes in the air, okay? It's kind of the smell of a storm. You know, some people can smell a storm coming, so you might get that sense this week. And if you look at the chart here, Venus is also in Leo this week. So that will be moving from around 10 to 15 degrees this week. And I think Venus in Leo brings an important, really important warmth to the chart. So we got all that Cancerian inwards, and Venus in Leo wants expression. So she is looking for beauty, creativity, visibility, bit of play and affection. She's looking for pleasure, but also that courage to be seen. Then there might be something here about expressing our hearts more openly. The sun rules Leo and it's in Cancer, so that expression is still rooted in feeling, in the emotional body. Venus in Leo this week, it's not going to be about, performance or display. She's carrying something from the emotional interior into creative form. So use this week. It could be a beautiful week for making something, okay? Beautiful creativity from the heart. Good for you painters, you poets, especially with that Mercury. So yeah, make something, share, do that, share it, return. If you've been away from your creative practices, fantastic week for returning to that. It's like allowing our feelings to become art, language, to be expressed by voice. color or gesture, to do the Venusian things. And Venus is also moving into a supportive relationship with Saturn in Aries here, which helps bring form and maturity. So there's a way, they're in trine, okay? So again, really good ease and flow here between Saturn and Venus. So there's a way of giving shape to our desires or beauty or our self-expression. There's a sense of our heart, the heart wanting to be seen, but Saturn will remind us that true expression also takes courage. That's Aries, structure and commitment here. Okay, things might be ignited this week in that way. And then we've got this Chiron at 0 degrees of Taurus. I've spoken quite a bit about Chiron moving into Taurus. So it's at the beginning of that new sign, but it's an important background piece. Go and listen to Chiron and the Pharmacon. Okay, Friday Muse again. Chiron's moved from Aries into Taurus, so it's shifting. He's the wounded healer, and he's shifting the wound from things of identity, survival, self-assertion into the Taurian themes of body, land, worth, food, money, stability, and it will be about safety and belonging in the material world. So at 0 degrees Taurus, right at the beginning, it's raw and it's new. So it might speak to wounds around embodiment. So, you know, you got this Cancerian energy that is talking about body and feeling. We might have wounds there. We might find that difficult to tap into. But also, it could be speaking to our insecurities, our sense of self-worth, even our physical safety, but our resources and relationship with the earth itself. And Chiron will be there for several years to work with this, so it's not all going to come up this week. But notice if any of those wounds show, especially with all that Cancerian energy, because we'll have easier access to our inner bodily, emotional, you know, feelings. Because when we're placing all this alongside that Cancer, the theme of nourishment deepens. Cancer's asking where we feel emotionally held, and Taurus asks us what sustains us in real and tangible ways. Very practical. It's coming from feeling, but it's practical with this Taurus. So Chiron will be showing us where that relationship to sustenance has been wounded. So really watch your responses this week and what comes up. We've got this week, it can be described through Mercury and Jupiter and the messages and meaning. But beneath that, there's that deeper question around what truly nourishes us and restores us, what steadies us and gives us that sense of belonging that's not dependent on constant explanation. It's just there and we know it's there. By the 27th, that moon is in Sagittarius, and that's adding a desire for meaning, horizon, and perspective. After the Libra moon, at the beginning of the week, and that's bringing relationship and adjustment, the moon in Sagittarius will want to understand that larger story. And it is ruled by Jupiter again. So we got Jupiter figure in here. So it's asking us to lift our eyes and ask what all this means, all this feeling, senses, sense of security. What's that mean in a wider context? So we can particularly tap into our relationship with the earth and resource and how we're feeling about that. But again, if we go back to that Mercury and Jupiter, that answer might still be forming in us. Sagittarius moon will give us that sense that we want the big truth, but the Mercury is slowing in Cancer. So that wider meaning has got to include all of that emotional material. We can't ignore the feeling to get to the philosophy. So we're being asked to drop out of our minds into the feeling, but then to combine the two. So we might need to let memory speak before any wisdom, that wisdom you get with Jupiter, can arrive. So I think the week's got a beautiful shape. It's beginning with the sun newly in Cancer, the first quarter moon in Libra. It's bringing emotional and relational adjustment. And then it's going to deepen through Mercury applying to Jupiter in Cancer as that message or memory begins to gather meaning for us. And it's going to carry the ongoing collective disruption of Uranus and Gemini square the nodes of fate. So the mental field, particularly the collective mental field, is continuously being rewired. And it ends with Mars preparing to enter Gemini, which tells us the pace is about to change. Mars in Gemini, an air sign, it'll pick up speed. It's been having a bit of a chill in Taurus. So the quieter work of this week is to listen for the message that's incomplete, or it's got more to say, and notice those conversations, memories, dreams, feelings that keep returning to you. So pay attention as well, particularly to what your body knows. Your body would speak to you without words. Okay, so tap into that body, do something that helps you, mindful practice, going through all your senses or getting out and grounding, but really connect with your body this week to open long enough for a deeper meaning to come through. So we can ask ourselves this week, what is it trying to be remembered? Do we need to approach a conversation with more tenderness? Is there an old story that's ready to be understood through a wider lens with a different perspective? Have a look where you might be seeking a quick answer, because the soul this week will be asking for a slower, more meaningful type of listening. And I think the most important thing this week is to think about what nourishment truly means to you now. Because with that Mercury and Jupiter in Cancer, Jupiter at that final degree of Cancer and Mercury slowing before the retrograde, we're being asked to return to the waters of memory and meaning. There might be a wisdom here, but it comes through feeling the past and the places that we've been shaped, held, wounded, protected, or left to protect ourselves. It was a very tender week. So in summary for this week, the sun's move into Cancer brings us into the emotional body after that Gemini new moon last week. The Libra first quarter moon is asking how our needs sit within relationship, and Mercury applying to Jupiter in Cancer is bringing that meaningful message, conversational memory. But Mercury slowing tells us that the story will need to be revisited again. Uranus in Gemini continues to shake our mental field, electrify it. And Mars at the end of Taurus is telling us that the atmosphere is beginning to build towards a more electric, restless phase in Gemini. This is a week for listening carefully, especially for the things that we haven't found the words for, okay? That meaning's forming. That message is really close to us, but it might need time, tenderness, and revision before it fully reveals itself. So that's what I have for you. Thank you so much if you're still here for watching. If it resonated, please like, subscribe, leave a comment with which part of this week's astrology you feeling most strongly. And if you want to book a reading, www.soulsymbols.co.uk, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.